Okay, good morning everybody. We're here this morning to talk about the University of Birmingham story, really, which is probably really key to start with giving you a bit of background about the university. We were the first customer for Canvas in the UK. We're a large university, 35,000 students plus, and we're part of the Russell Group. And as such, really, I think it's fairly important that we set the context of the background to the digital sort of experience, student experience, that we've been planning for and continue to work towards, with Canvas actually at the heart of that journey. So what we're really going to talk about is that context and picking up on change management, how important it was to allow us to have that background work going on first, to then move forward with many of the initiatives and things that we're going to talk about across the digital journey, how we're able to support that, support meaning really how we're working with academics to support their confidence and their skills to be able to promote and support many of the initiatives, and students. And the old chestnut at the end there around how are we measuring our impact, reporting on our success, planning for sharing that with both internally and externally, because many of the initiatives in terms of a timeline have been really over the last 12 to 18 months in particular. So I think what's worth mentioning first of all is our digital journey, which I probably should have said on the very first slide, is that when we first got Canvas, we did a pretty much, and this was before my time, but I know my colleague Joe was here there, we had WebCT, and we did a fairly rapid lift and shift in the summer of 2013 in about 6 weeks to everybody just having access to Canvas. So that was a big challenge, and as such then everybody sort of was familiarising themselves with Canvas, and there are benefits and there are drawbacks of all those different approaches. So I think really leading on to the next couple of years, it was anticipated that really we needed to get some kind of step change in place to be able to have a much more cohesive, strategic, institutional approach towards how we were going to use Canvas to best effect to support student learning and for academic engagement. And much of that was driven, those changes around the current external and internal drivers, and that real feedback from students around that consistency of student experience. And many of those external drivers, as people are familiar with, is the emergence of TEF, the emergence even more recently of the Office for Students, NSS feedback, and thinking about how we can respond to the changing HE landscape and policy to really put learning and Canvas as our key tool to support that at the heart and soul of what we do in terms of supporting student learning. So what did emerge that we've got on there is plans were afoot to create a Higher Education Futures Institute at the University of Birmingham. Historically, we are a very strong research university, and education perhaps was not on the same level with that, and education needed a home, both virtual and physical, and it needed somewhere where we can have as a central driver and promote education at the heart of things. Now, HEFI was, as now is our nickname, HEFI, the HEFI home, but the Institute really has been driven strategically by our PVC education, Kathy Armour, and very much been, we've been fortunate to have senior stakeholder engagement with that. And I think the key ingredient before we then talk about some of the actual touch points along the student journey is the fact it's brought together 3 key areas. It's brought together education research, our education development team, academic practice team, and our digital education team, all under one roof, under one institute. And that's afforded us some massive opportunities to work together to really get the pedagogy driving the learning and actually looking at learning design as well in particular. So that actually started in a year ago virtually as now, where the Higher Education Futures Institute was born. It's still a virtual institute. However, perhaps looking at just the timeline of that backdrop or of the context is January or before January 2016, The university had a small central e-learning team of 4 or 5, I think, key people who didn't really have a great deal of visibility because the structures weren't there to allow them to have that. And then 2.5 years ago, which is when I came into my post and working very much closely with Joe as well from then on in and a wider team, the university set up a TEL hub. And that was a hub and spoke approach to try and get more embedded into the colleges, which is our college structure at the university. We then had another step change and we rebranded, along with the launch of the Virtual Institute, a year ago as now, as Birmingham Digital Education team. And as such, in a few weeks' time actually, we're moving to a new physical location, which is at the heart of our campus, where all those teams, both the academic practice team, our team, and some researchers, will be all working together in a new build, which is sort of manifest of the new Education Institute. And that's been absolutely key for us to then consider aspects of the digital journey and the student experience as we go right along for that whole kind of timeline. But I think, again, just to emphasize, that whole story and the scene was set because this allowed us to work with directors of education, and we have 5 colleges, we have a college and school structure, all the heads of education within those schools as our absolute key stakeholders to drive forward many of the initiatives and work with them closely. So I think that kind of backdrop was really important for us because we had some leverage and we had a really clear vision from our PVC education of how she saw digital and the implicit use of digital tools in what we do, both for students and for academics. And so really what we want to look at is we've got 4 or 5 institutional examples of even before pre-induction of how Canvas is at the heart of what we do. It's talking to some of the other digital tools that we work with, all at an institutional level. And then we're looking to hone in on a specific case study around teaching and learning and how we've worked with that, how it's touched our international students, careers leading into graduation as well, and then how we support that. So I think the examples I just wanted to share with you, and many of this activity is all really the last sort of 12 to 18 months, is first of all the role that Canvas is going to play, and this is a plan for this next academic year, in our widening access Birmingham A to B scheme. This is a sort of fairly flagship initiative really, but we've got quite a good reputation Birmingham has for its A to B scheme, and it's really targeting a lot of first generation students across the West Midlands and some nationally. And what we have done is now been able to pull a lot of that together, the outreach work we do under one umbrella activity, using Canvas and allowing them to have a Canvas account. And actually sixth formers in particular, and students who are applying to the university and in FE colleges, both nationally and in schools, are actually working and doing a lot of pre-application stuff in our outreach programme using Canvas. And it's hoped really the planned impact we really think will be about better conversion rates and allowing young people to have more confidence when they do arrive at university with some of the tools, particularly Canvas, our VLE, and how that can support and help them with their teaching and learning. The second one we wanted to share with you is how we've used Canvas for a student pre-arrival sort of stroke welcome activity. Last year we piloted this with the business school and it had great feedback, went really well. And this year what we have done is every student across the university, that's new students, returners and PG taught students, has received incrementally in September a welcome or a return, welcome back email with a Canvas link, register, and actually a whole wealth of information about the opportunities, support services, academic skills support that the university offers, all driven through Canvas. And again, the big feedback we got from last year's pilot was, for new students, how that really eased them into fairly quickly the familiarity that Canvas is what we use, it's what we do, and how it supports their learning hugely. We are able to track to what extent people are registering early, and this year's success was really, really good in terms of people actually logging on and using some of the tools before they'd even arrived to the university. And the third area that we just wanted to share with you as well was our huge project, safe to say, it has been a very big project, around personal academic tutoring. And we mentioned earlier some of the digital tools that institutionally we're working with, is that we've partnered with PebblePad, and we have an institutional license. And we're using that as our key tool to drive forward a digital approach to personal academic tutoring. So in the welcome pack, for example, with new first years who arrive at university, there is a seamless integration into PebblePad that students can then look at, they can do some activity, and that is going to be their sort of digital footprint with almost a sort of minimal entitlement, really, of what they should expect to see as part of their personal academic tutoring at the university. And that's a particular area that we feel the university needed to hone in on, have some sort of consistency around that, and that we get plenty of support for students. And the workbook and story that that tells within personal academic tutoring really talks about 3 meetings and how those are recorded with your student, with your personal tutor. It also talks about them picking up a piece of feedback and actually reflecting on that, and particularly if it's got some online feedback from Canvas, talking through what that meant, what they can do with it. But also one of the other key things that emerged as part of that project that we've also been able to embed as part of that is that the workbook for the personal academic tutoring is also signposts back into Canvas a conversation around academic integrity. Now, this is a huge thing at the moment, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, around managing academic integrity. And again, what we were able to capture, we had a senior steer on this as well, and we've been doing some research with Nottingham University around how we can support students to really understand what that means, and what the implications are if they're not familiar with some of the practices around plagiarism, academic integrity. So again, as part of that whole sort of package, with Canvas again using that as a really key part of it, we've highlighted a module in Canvas which has a quiz at the end. We've put an 80% pass mark. Students can do that as many times as they want. And again, as part of the personal tutoring package, that sort of engages a dialogue with their tutor to make sure that they really have understood what that means. And I'm sure many of you are probably aware that has implications further down the line that they were really hoping that has an impact on perhaps a number of cases where there are challenges to the academic integrity or even plagiarism cases being picked up, because we've built into their induction programme, and again using that Canvas module, an academic integrity unit module. And I think, again, part of that whole sort of seamless journey we're trying to create, I mean, I'm sort of doing fairly much the earlier part, is that even from sixth form in applying, pre-induction, when you arrive, you're thinking about academic integrity, what other tools talk to Canvas. We've got Panopto embedded, so lecture capture is a huge part of what we do at Birmingham. And again, there's a fairly seamless view in Canvas of how we're using Panopto and lecture capture. And the 17-18 academic year, which is the first year where HEFI were involved, we revisited all of our policy around lecture capture, maintained an opt-in approach, but had automated recordings that are linked into Canvas courses. So that was ease with which students could access that. We've extended that this year to whiteboard capture as well. But I think, again, one of the key things for that was it is opt-in. Our data suggests that last year, with our new approach, and particularly having a clear policy on it, that we had 44% increase in viewings, or 59% increase in viewings, I think, and 44% increase in the number of sessions that were created through lecture capture. And one, again, really key thing that Canvas has helped us to work in terms of working together with that is that because it is opt-in and our real drive is about how we're supporting learning, student learning, If academics are planning a module and it's appropriate in certain areas, we don't have to lecture capture every week. There's a very good rationale for that. In Canvas, we've created a module overview sheet with icons to denote, well, if it's not being captured, is there a talking head? Is there a podcast? What are the other resources for that lecture or that particular learning activity that can support students to support their learning? And that has actually proved a really good conduit to be able to support the mapping out. And students are aware, particularly in medical programs and some areas where there is sensitive things that lecture capture might not necessarily be appropriate for. And we found, again, Canvas being at the heart of that and the home of what we do, tools talking to it either way, has really helped us map out what is our sort of digital learner journey looking like. And I think it also is through that whole conversation, this is what Joe's going to pick up on, is it's led that whole thing about consistency and saying, well, we've got these things in as part of that journey. What are we doing about the actual Canvas modules themselves? How are we making that be more consistent? And what's our approach to teaching and learning? Because we're privileged to be working very closely with an academic practice team who are really challenging learning design and what Canvas can really do to have a really engaging learning experience. And I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to pick up with some of those things.
Cheers, Jane. So a lot of things Jane's talked about there are institutionally led innovations or projects. And if you think of the student journey as being like a train track, so I'm going to move around, give the cameraman something to do. So down here we've got the A to B, the access to Birmingham. So these are students who are sixth formers. They're just getting on the train, going through the university, and the train track is a Canvas journey. You like the analogy, you see where this is going. As they go through. So they come through and they get to this stage, and this is the pre-induction stuff that Jane talked about. So they haven't quite come into the institution yet, but they are already on Canvas, already engaging with Canvas, doing quizzes and this kind of thing. And this is where the rest of the student cohort comes on. So it's like getting to Euston on the Northern Line, suddenly everyone crams on the train, carry on going down. And what these institutional projects have allowed us to do, and the backing of the PVC for Education and the formation of HEFI, is lay all this groundwork in, lay the track, put the signals in, put the stations in for things like personal tutoring. These things which we know occur right across the institution, but we didn't have a standard way of doing them before, so we put the groundwork in. What I'm going to talk about now is they get to this stage of their journey, they come to their course, they started their course, and suddenly the track splits. So every student will have maybe a dozen modules to take, and each of those modules is a separate train track being driven by a different academic. And there's a whole journey there as well. So there's a starting of the module, they progress through the modules, do the learning activities or whatever, and they get to the end point and there'll be an assessment of some kind, an exam. And that's where the real challenge comes into a big institution like ours, because you've literally got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these separate journeys going on. And it's very hard to you don't want to kind of impact on the creativity of individual academics and how they want to teach and learn. But we do want to promote best practice in learning design and the way you use these tools. So some of these routes will be a kind of scenic journey. Some of them will be a bit more circuitous, perhaps, depending on how the academics have structured those modules. So what we tried to do is set best practice across the institution. So these are things like, quite simple things, like module homepages will be consistent across a program. So the students start their journey on these separate tracks, and they know where they're going straight away. They can see the consistency there. We've also developed this Canvas style guide, Canvas guide, which just gives tips to academics on how to very simply transform the way they teach. And it really harks back to what Jared was saying this morning about small steps, not big changes. So little things like send an announcement at the beginning of the module to welcome your students onto the module. It's a really quick thing to do. It's very small, but it does have that personal touch then straight away. And it's something you can reach out to individual students a bit more than in a big lecture theatre like this. So the Canvas guide is all based around that ethos, really, of helping academics to teach using Canvas, but in the most effective way. what I wanted to zoom in on a little bit is this example of the collaborative teaching laboratory, which is a project I've been working on. So if we go back to the point where the tracks divide, if you're a STEM student, you're going to have a swathe of things to do, a swathe of different modules. A lot of these will involve laboratory work. So the chemists will take a few tracks down into the laboratory work. Physicists will do some stuff there as well, environmental scientists. And this project was a way of looking at quite a range of these tracks, the individual modules, and try and give them some kind of framework to work within. So it's not about kind of trying to force people to teach a certain way. It's just giving a framework and a journey, and the stations, if you like, on these individual tracks, which give some consistency. So we were lucky enough to get involved in this quite early on. It's a big new laboratory building is the main bulk of the project, so it's an estates project, and it opened this September. Various labs inside there, but very multidisciplinary. So we have these 5 different schools who have always taught separately in the past, and around 220 practicals being run inside this building. And this is what I mean by a kind of a mini journey, if you like, along these tracks. So it's basically a blended learning approach or a flipped learning approach, where we give them more stuff up front about the lab, some more kind of electronic stuff in the lab, and some post-lab using the smart assessment tools. So the main drivers were around making better use of the lab time. So rather than them all standing and watching an academic demonstrate an experiment, we'd have a video of that experiment up front, or an interactive simulation about that experiment. And similarly with all the bits and pieces of kit they're going to be using. We're going to provide them all, or are providing them with little video clips and interactive things so they can play with the kit before they go in there, so they know what things are. Other things we did are 360 tours. So these are really easy to do these days, very quick and quite cheap to put together. You can just simply get a £250 camera and take these pictures and stitch them together to make a tour with interactive elements in it as well. So they can click on the test tubes, say, oh yeah, it's a test tube. But more importantly, you can do things like health and safety. So take them into these big labs, which are quite intimidating spaces to go into for the first time. Some of them house 180 students. There's fume cupboards and things all over the place. And they can walk around the lab in 3D and see where the emergency exits are, see where the eye wash stations are, this kind of thing. In the lab, we have an electronic lab notebook, which is powered using class notebook, OneNote class notebook. Also smart worksheets, and after the lab, they'll do assessment on Canvas or maybe Maple TA. So you can see the kind of student journey continuing there, but consistent across all these STEM subjects. So that's the kind of the impact we've been able to make. Just want to quickly show that the ecosystem, because this is, as I say, the STEM-based stuff, but we have Canvas in the middle, and it's really fundamental that Canvas is a place. You often, with some of these products, have alternative ways of doing the same thing, but we've been very clear we want Canvas to be the main focus for everything. Everything goes through Canvas, assessment goes through Canvas, but we link in these different tools. And I'm happy to speak to people afterwards about these integrations, because there's various levels of integration as well you can use, LTI, embedded stuff. But complex thing. Okay, so the students are going along on the train journey. Not all these student travelers are the same. So we have international students. So we have some students on a branch of a train line, just really breaking down now, in Dubai. There's a part of a train track that goes off via Dubai. But the point is the touch points are the same. So the infrastructure is the same. They can still use the personal tutoring, all this kind of stuff. And similarly, we've got a partnership now with the Birmingham International Academy to support our international students, who are a massive cohort. And of course, the technology makes things easier there. If you think about videos with captions, we can translate those captions, for example, quite easily now. So continuing on the train track, they've finished all their kind of modules, going towards Jane at the end there.
He's about to graduate.
And so graduation at the end of the train journey. And the careers as well. So and actually careers will tell you they have touch points all the way along this journey in Canvas as well. So they don't just come at the end and say, right, what do you want to do now? Here's a choice of careers. They're actually touching with the students all the way through and to make sure the students know what the options are when they get to the end. So the students are planning all the way through, or have the potential to plan all the way through about where they want to end up. So that's a complete kind of timeline there. Now, as Jane said, a lot of this stuff has been brought in over the last 2 years. Some of it is based on existing, I guess, pockets of practice which we brought into the centre. But supporting all this stuff is really hard and it's time intensive. So we brought in what we're calling a blended support model with various levels. So there are people on the ground. We use Canvas's 24/7 support, which is really good because it does more than just tech support. They do actually talk you through how to use tools. So actually that takes away quite a lot of the work from our teams. We can signpost our lecturers to go and speak to Canvas 24/7 if they want to set up an assignment or set up a quiz, and the Canvas guys taught them through that, so that's really helpful. We have a teaching and learning gateway, and this is where it's a public-facing thing, actually, where you can go and you can see the range of online modules we create for our staff to talk them through how to use all these bits and pieces. So, for example, personal tutoring in PebblePad, we have a module on there. The staff can go on, watch a screencast of how to do the personal tutoring thing, frequently asked questions. So it's online training, if you like, but very kind of focused and bespoke to the way we are doing things at Birmingham. The third line of that is bespoke face-to-face training and support. So we have teams in all the colleges, so we have a hub and spoke model. So we're always getting a central message and central information about where we are with stuff. And then we can disseminate that out to our key stakeholders to make sure they're informed, so the heads of education know what's going on, the lecturers know what's going on. And we can deliver bespoke training, so like the STEM project I talked about there, we can deliver that in life and environmental sciences and engineering and physical sciences and concentrate that resource in there for that specific initiative. And the final thing, as I mentioned before, the Birmingham Canvas Guide. So this is a very easy to use website where staff can just quickly go, there's a checklist, they can scan down, say, am I doing that, am I doing that? And it signposts them to resources to help them as well. So that's our train journey for our students, and that's how we're supporting it. I'm going to hand back to Jane now to talk about impact.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things for us really as we move forward is that they're all fairly young, the last 18 months to 2 years. But in particular, I think, as I said, the context was critical because the last 12 months, the train has gone fast. In fact, it's shot off the rails a couple of times, but it has actually accelerated its pace with which we've done things, because I think the context and how we've set that up has been really key, going from a small team of 5 or 6 people to really now a team of 20 staff. And if we were to include some of our wider Birmingham Digital colleagues who operate sort of closely with us in colleges, probably a team of about 35 staff who are able to draw upon that resource to be able to deliver some of these really institutional initiatives along that student journey that is really key. However, the expectations are high. We are planning around where are our key data touch points to feedback. We've already got great data back around our Panopta story. We're monitoring closely what's going to be happening with the induction modules this year, which went across the whole institution, personal tutoring, the CTL flipped learning model, and those things also, our Dubai campus, which has just started in delivering teaching last weekend, and capturing that from staff and students both qualitatively and quantitatively. And we know that the expectation will be that the reality of the world we live in is that that data and that feedback will be needed to be able to support TEF working in response to some of the expectations of the Office for Students. But also, more importantly, if we get that really good process in place, that good data and good feedback should fall out of that. But I think the key difference has been that we've been able to take this from an institutional point of view, which is no mean task in somewhere as diverse and huge as Birmingham. But the critical point has been we've had senior stakeholder engagement and support to plan out and drive some of these key initiatives. And throughout the entire train journey, Canvas is there at the front with their hat on, doffing people as they pass by, and being at the heart and soul of that, as different tools talk to that, and as students really, from the very beginning, see the VLE as what we do, and a fairly seamless digital experience, that they're all well integrated and embedded. Our IT services we work with have been brilliant to help us map that out. And I think if there's key lessons we've learned from this is we have a really good collaborative team, and because we have a hub and spoke approach, we're able to talk to the key people in the colleges and the heads of education and listen to what their real needs are, but with a central steer and some bespoke nuances in those subject areas. And for example, the STEM subjects and the activity that was taking place with CTL, a lot of that teaching and learning methodology we're bringing across to different subject areas and able to do that. And the international campus are benefiting from that approach as well. So I suppose in terms of next steps, we just keep going. The train is continuing to stop off at different stations. We have some institutional plans, but I think our biggest challenge now, along with, I'm sure, lots of other people sitting here in the room now, is we have pockets of brilliant practice using Canvas around the university for online assessment and feedback. But what we get from students, as ever, is it's inconsistent. And we now, perhaps as we've done with a personal academic tutoring model, are going to try and sort of galvanise an institutional approach to draw on the best of that practice and offer the advice and guidance around that whole learner journey around online submission, assessment and feedback, again putting Canvas at the heart of that. And we're delighted to know that the new features on anonymous moderated marking are really going to help us do that, so we can start to pull everything together and see where that takes us for the next 12 months and add that hopefully to that whole repertoire of things that we're looking to get a student seamless digital experience where it really is moving from the innovative to the norm of what we do, with staff feeling confident and competent to make informed choices about the tools in Canvas and the other tools that sit around it, of when they're going to use them, how they're going to use them, why, and that students can benefit, and it can really support their learning at the end of the day for student experience. And I speak as a parent, a former teacher, and in the key role that we have working with a brilliant team at Birmingham to try and deliver that on behalf of students. So I think we're probably out of time. So thank you very much for listening. I don't know whether we have time for questions, do we, from that at all?
Hi, thanks for that. That was really interesting. You showed that you integrated with a lot of the different kind of add-ons. What do you think your staff would find the most useful of those?
Of the extra VLE tools? Joe, you want to pick on? So
which of the, sorry, you're talking about the ecosystem slide where there's different plugins, or?
Yeah, the different plugins.
Yeah. I think PedagoGical's critical for us this year. We haven't had an e-portfolio product before. We've been using the Canvas one, which is good. PedagoGical allows us to do some extra things and provide some more structures around the reflections and the kind of feedback we're getting from the students. So that's going to be, I think, a big one for us this year, PedagoGical. It's already built in, as I say, to the personal academic tutoring system. So we've been able to build a structure for the students, but it's all owned by the students. So we give them a template, they fill in their reflections, and they choose to share it or not share it. But that structure it gives us is really, really useful.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
That sounded really interesting. I was just wondering how you deal with user accounts for student pre-enrollment, and then how that transitions to their user account, the students' user accounts when they become an official student. So
you mean before, for the pre-induction module, or for the A to B students?
Both, really.
Both, yeah. Do you want to take that one, Joe?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I think for the A to B students, we've probably got about 1,600 students who are potential sort of sixth formers working closely with us. So they're acknowledged as a student at the university as a zero level. So they do get a proper account, and some of their formative work, building them up to being more confident learners, to then apply for some of the activities, to apply for the university and some of the activities they do, they are submitting to Canvas. So we're putting them as a recognised sort of zero, almost foundation work that they're doing. The pre-one is not such a problem for the returners, but for the new students that goes out to, is we pretty much, through working with our colleagues in registry, have got all that set up by, it didn't go out till the 10th of September. So it's 2 weeks before they arrive. That's all kind of in place so that they can then choose to register and log on as part of a welcome email, and then they're into Canvas.
But yeah, there was a bit of work there to kind of bring things forward from where we would normally do it for the incoming students. So we managed to get that relationship going with registry and get the data earlier into Canvas than we would have done in the past.
Yeah. It was planning for that earlier data rather than literally on Welcome Week or Freshers Week that we would have. And we learnt from that from last year because we sent it out on the day of the results last year. And we had obviously a much smaller group, but we didn't have necessarily engagement, and most students said they're not in a space for that then. Let's wait till they've all been on their weeks on holiday and everything else, and we felt that 10th was, and we captured a lot quite well because the timing was about right. Returners went out on the 17th, and postgraduate taught students went out on the 24th. And interesting, they're a cohort that in their feedback through their surveys particularly feel they're not getting the support that they need. So we're watching that one very closely. It's the first time we've sent it to them as well.